We're going to call over 6:05. We'll start out by with the Pledge of Allegiance, everybody. Please stand. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So first up is going to be the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Somebody want to make a motion to do that? Or does
Mr.
anybody have any
Chairman, I
questions?
move we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
So approved. Motion carries. Oh. The next thing on the item is going to be, sorry? You got to vote on that? All right, can we have a vote? We'll start with Mr. Kennedy. Oh,
Abstain?
Mr. Kennedy? Mr. Nelson? We're voting on the minutes from the last
Consent
meeting.
or the minutes from last meeting.
I was there. They're fine.
You don't need them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I vote aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Carries. The minutes are approved. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the appeals. Do we have everybody for Mr. Mitchell Birdie from 2205 Meridian? Are they present? Okay. And then we're looking for Mr. Schreiber from 19802 Keith Avenue. Okay. Where do you want to go ahead and get started?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So our first case tonight is a variance request at 22205 Meridian. Petitioner is in attendance this evening, so I'll go through my presentation. We'll do some question and answer if you may have them for me, and then we'll let the petitioner speak and or take any questions that you all may have tonight as well. I do have one first order of business. I like to remind everybody, board is aware. I'd like to make sure that the petitioners and any residents are also aware. Under state law, variances through the Zoning Board of Appeal can only be granted by a majority of the membership. We are a 7-member body, so it will take an affirmative vote of 4 board members to pass a variance tonight. So we have 6, which leaves us in the unenviable position of a potential 3-3 vote. But just want to remind you of that. It does take 4 to grant a variance. So, and then typically, I guess, Mr. Chair, we talked, what I'd like to do is get through both cases, but if the petitioner if either petitioner at the end of the discussion would like to request a tabling to the next meeting for a full contingent of the board for consideration by all 7 members, that's typically something that we offer up to most parties. So that will be up to them and what they want to do, but I wanted to put that out there and make sure that both of our petitioners were aware of that as well in terms of
Very good.
process.
Very good. You guys are aware? You understand? We have to have 4 votes for it to pass. Okay.
Okay, that being said, first case tonight's related to a fence. This is a request I mentioned already, 22205 Meridian. This is a lot that actually has 3 front yards. It faces Meridian. On a lot of the maps, this little connector is referred to as Island Drive, which is over here. On some other maps, it's been referred to as sort of a connector to thoroughfare. So regardless, it is still a public right-of-way, and then thoroughfare does wrap around on the east side of the property. This picture is actually oriented so that north is to your left, just to give you a feel. But 3 front yards, site and surrounding properties, zoned R1B, single-family residential, areas primarily developed with single-family residential homes. And the request before you tonight is for a fence enclosure that encroaches into the required setback in the thoroughfare front yard. What you'll see here momentarily is because of the uniqueness of this property, we basically had to apply the corner lot fence standards as well as the through lot fence standards. So we applied it as a corner lot on Meridian, and just for the sake of discussion, what I'll refer to as Island, and then we also reviewed it based on a through lot with frontage on Meridian and thoroughfare. So I'll show you a little more on that shortly. So this is a view of the actual plan. So the yellow is the property boundary, and then this is thoroughfare right-of-way, Meridian right-of-way, and again, as I mentioned, different plans and different aerials show different ideas here, but this is shown as island. Existing residence here, proposed fence outlined in green. So hopefully that shows okay on the screens for you. So they're a relatively smallish enclosure. Again, does encroach into the island front yard and the thoroughfare front yard. With respect to the island front yard, this being a corner lot component, it does comply with the fence ordinance. Though there are no issues as it relates to this portion of the fencing. What the petitioner is here for tonight is for a variance from the setback requirement from the thoroughfare side. So more on that to come. So I'll start with the right side of the screen. I needed to adjust my formatting here a little bit. So within your fence ordinance, which is in chapter 103 of the Township Code, it is outside of zoning. So if any of you had a hard time finding it, I apologize. We need to make sure that board members get a hard copy for those that still have books of the fence ordinance. So the requirement on a through lot or a double fronted lot is that you have to provide a 40-foot setback from the secondary street frontage. So in this case, the primary access is from Meridian. The property contains a Meridian address. Say that 5 times fast. And so we deemed the primary frontage to be Meridian. Therefore, the opposite of Meridian is thoroughfare. In this case, that is the secondary frontage in the language of your ordinance. And what it amounts to is they have about a 10-foot setback off of the thoroughfare front lot line. So ordinance for a through lot I mentioned requires a 40-foot setback. So that is the variance that they're seeking tonight. And I've got more on this to come, but in essence, what the ordinance would allow them, and it's very inaccurate, but just to give you a feel, a full 40-foot setback from thoroughfare puts the fence somewhere in this area. I did scale the drawing, and I estimated that it would give them about a 5-foot area, and that's not 5 foot, a 5-foot area of fence enclosure that they would be allowed under ordinance. So I think you can see the constraints that the ordinance puts them in as it relates to the nature and condition of their lot. So
It looks like it's 47 feet from the actual roadway.
that's correct.
Okay, so there's like a 25-foot easement there?
So the full right-of-way width is basically, in this case, on the thoroughfare side, you can see a little bit over here, is basically the yellow line to yellow line.
Okay.
So that's the full right-of-way width. I did not pull the plat maps. I don't know what the actual width of the thoroughfare right-of-way is. It's not Meridian's is much larger. I believe Meridian is like a 120-foot right-of-way width. Thoroughfare is probably in the 66 to 100 foot.
Ryan, I checked in the plat books. Meridian is 150 feet.
Okay.
Thoroughfare is 75.
75, okay. So yeah, so you can see here, again, full right-of-way width there. And not all, you have to remember too, not all roads are actually centered within their respective right-of-way. So in this case, yeah, it is, the fence itself is drawn in. They did measure, I believe they put stakes out. If any of you had a chance to go out and visit the site, yeah, we asked the petitioner to do that. They were kind enough to oblige. So it is roughly 47 feet from the edge of the road, but under ordinance requirement, it isn't, we're not measuring from edge of road, we're measuring from the property line. So that's where the need for the variance comes in. That covers the right side of your screen. The left side of your screen contains really just a quick summary of the review criteria. So section 23.5B of the zoning ordinance provides you all with 14 standards that you apply to dimensional variance requests. And if you believe that those standards are met, then you can move forward with an approval. If you do not believe that they are met, then you should move forward with a rejection. All that out of the way, the quick overview of my report. So as I referred to it, I mentioned to you in the drawing that I ballpark it as about a 5-foot wide fence that they could have. And realistically, a 5-foot wide fence enclosure, in my experience, I don't really deem that as a functional fence. So I refer to it basically as the ordinance is presenting them with a non-functional fence per strict compliance, just my opinion. In this case, you could view that as unnecessarily burdensome under the test for practical difficulty. They are only seeking the one variance, so that the relief from the thoroughfare setback is the only variance they are seeking. As I mentioned, the corner lot standards for Meridian and Island are met. The height is met. The design of the fence is met. I kind of glossed over that on this slide, but it's a 4-foot tall fence. It's a sort of the wrought iron picket style, but it is a vinyl fence, but it is under the terminology of your ordinance, it is a decorative fence. So everything else about the fence does comply. The only issue is with that setback along the thoroughfare front lot line. As it goes, I guess when we're looking at the idea of extraordinary conditions, unusual circumstances, the property's a triangle, which in and of itself generally makes life difficult under zoning ordinances. The fact that at 3 points it also has front yards really puts some extreme pressure on the applicant in terms of compliance, in my opinion. I do believe that there are conditions here that are present that could be used to justify some amount of variance. Whether you believe it's the amount requested or something else is up to you all. But my opinion, I do believe there are conditions present that support the variance that's being requested. I've already mentioned strict compliance allows about a 5-foot wide fence enclosure. In terms of fairness or substantial justice and preservation of property rights, which are two of your key standards, when you're not on a waterfront lot, most property owners on the island do have the ability to install some form of functional fencing. Again, there are special provisions for corner lot situations. There are special provisions for through lot situations. This is one of those cases where the nature of the lot just doesn't allow them to do what most other people could. So again, based on my review, my opinion, I believe you could find that those standards are met as well in this particular instance. And then just sort of the really long summary bullet point, the last one there, trying to incorporate most of the other standards. You do have 14 of them, so many of them are somewhat redundant, but in closing, I believe that based on the nature of the property, the scope of the project, the variance that's being sought, I don't foresee anything in terms of safety issues, adverse impacts to neighboring properties, land values, neighborhood character, supply of light and air, certainly not traffic flow, or just in general the orderly development of the surrounding area. So that's my overview, Mr. Chair. Happy to take any questions that you all may have of me. If not, we could certainly let the petitioner come up and say a few words, and or you may have questions of them.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Borden?
What is the impact on the neighbors? Any issues with that?
Oh, in terms of the notifications?
No, just, are they, they're not here. They're not here, but I just wondered if there's any issues with neighbors being upset about this fence.
They were all notified per state and
Okay.
ordinance requirements, and Brittany, Lori, I don't believe we had any written or verbal
We'll assume then-
objections
Okay.
nor support. We
Okay.
just had no comment from the neighbors,
Okay.
essentially.
Okay, thank you.
So, Brian, per the ordinance, clearly you're allowed a 4-foot fence, forgetting
Correct.
about the non-conformance, but could you go 6 foot, 5 foot, 3, what?
If they wanted to go taller, that would be another issue with the thoroughfare front yard. So if they were proposing a 5 or 6 foot tall fence, they would need to seek a second variance, which they have not. They kept it at 4 foot because 4 foot is
Okay.
what is allowed in this particular instance.
Require more setback, would it?
No, well, it couldn't be where it is. It couldn't be 10 feet off of thoroughfare. So again, there's the way that through lots are treated is much different than an internal lot. And in all honesty, most through lots, we don't have a lot of them. There are some neighborhoods that have them. Typically, when you have a through lot situation, you have a narrow lot that is very deep. And the idea being that the 40-foot setback off of that secondary yard is basically sort of the build-to line for any residences that would be there. So on a through lot, you don't usually get the opposite situation where it's, in this case, it's very shallow, but it's very wide.
What if it was a privacy fence instead of
That would not be allowed either. That would be a third variance in that case. So again, they've kept this, they've checked every box except for
Okay.
the setback along
Thank you.
thoroughfare.
Anybody else? Like, no. All right, we're all set, thank you. Hello?
First and foremost, I'll introduce myself. So, Mitchell Berardi. I am the homeowner. I live there with my fiance and my 1-year-old son. I just turned 1 this week, and our 5-year-old puppy. And just like to say first, thank you all for the time and hearing this. Thank you, Brian, for preparing it. To add additional context to the question regarding neighbors, we have had multiple neighbors, once we put the sign up and the flags up, come over and kind of ask what we were doing. Actually showed them what it is that we presented to you and did receive, support from multiple neighbors of ours. I think as, Brian really well laid out, our whole goal in this is to provide some form of an enclosure, mainly for our son who's starting to get very active and our very active dog, just to keep them enclosed, especially considering, we're on Meridian, which is relatively busy, as well as there's plenty of wildlife, and we're trying to do that in a way that is the most minimal variance from the ordinance. And we hope that we, presented that well, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for the petitioner? Nope, looks like we're all set. Thank you.
Okay, I move that due to the practical difficulty facing the resident, the exceptional nature of the property, and the fact that this request still meets the intent of the fencing and zoning ordinance, that this variance be approved in order to provide substantial justice to the applicant and preserve property rights and fairness.
Second.
Maybe we do a roll call vote. We start with Mr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you very much. Good luck with your fence and your child and animals. Yep.
Get all that, Lori?
Hey, Mr. Board, when you're ready.
Thank you again. So our second case this evening, property is located 19802 Keith Avenue. If you look at your screens, the subject site is this guy right here, waterfront lot, west side of Keith. Existing residence, existing detached accessory building. And they do have some waterfront accessory structures as well in the form of dock. So this is the lot right here. The site and surroundings are all zoned R1B, single-family zoning. Surrounding use is consistent with R1B in terms of detached single-family residences. This request is slightly more complex than the last one, just given the nature and the number of variances that we have to deal with tonight. So just kind of bear with me a little bit here. I want to make sure I try to explain this as clearly as possible. So part of the request, really this is, there's two components to the request. One is tied to an expansion of this existing detached accessory building. The other is tied to the installation of fencing, some of which has already been installed. So there are two different items really in front of you that comprise the entire request. Here are a couple of photos. Thank you, Mr. Schweikert, for taking these and providing these for the presentation tonight. So here's a look from the south lot line looking sort of north and west. You can see the existing garage in this area here. And again, as I had mentioned, at least some part, if not all of the fence that's being sought has already been installed. The plans actually note it at two different heights. The plans note a portion at 5 foot and a portion at 6 foot. So one of the things I want to make sure the petitioner addresses tonight is whether that is accurate or whether the fence that has been installed is the entirety of the fencing they're looking for. I guess I just want to make sure that we're clear what we're reviewing and what the board is considering tonight. So whether or not it's simply the existing fence or whether there's more fencing being proposed towards the street front yard. So here's a look inside between the fence and the existing building. And then a look off of the rear of the site here, the rear of the building. This is where the proposed addition would be. Looks like there's already actually a bit of a hard surface slab that might even actually support the addition that's being proposed. I'm not sure if any construction modifications would be required or not, but there is something in place there already. So. This is the zoom out of the plan that's been presented to you. So again, this is the property here. A couple of points that you'll hear me say later, what I'm going to say now as well. The property is it's quite narrow. The property is non-conforming under R1B standards. It provides a lot width of only about 54 feet. This is an 80-foot lot width district, so it is definitely narrow in relation to ordinance standards as well as the other properties in the neighborhood. If you look to the south, don't have the actual dimension, but you can see it's much wider, probably even more so than the 80-foot district standard. The residence is also non-conforming. It does sit essentially at a 0 lot line to the north side. And then the existing garage, in the terms of the ordinance, detached accessory building, that is also non-conforming. The couple of issues with this structure are that on waterfront lots, you are only allowed a detached accessory building of 120 square feet. And I believe this structure is, I'm going to put it in there, about 465 is what I came up with. So it is already larger than what would be allowed, therefore it's deemed non-conforming. I'm going to take the next one, and it's just the same plan but zoomed in just a little bit so we can actually see it better. So existing garage, proposed addition that takes it to 855 square feet total. So reminder, one, this is a non-conforming building. Two, the max for a waterfront lot is 120 square feet. So those are the two key elements of the detached accessory building. In terms of setbacks from the side, those are met. In terms of building height, that is met. And in terms of lot coverage, because again, the lot is very narrow, but it is very deep as well. So it is actually a compliant lot in terms of area. So there aren't any lot coverage issues either. So that's the primary focus of the garage. So moving into the fencing, so you can see here there are actually the notes here show that there's a 6-foot portion of fence and a 5-foot portion of fence. So again, I want to defer back to the petitioner. I'd like them to just clarify that, because when I look at what was installed, again, this is all one height. So I'm not sure if there's more fence being proposed or if that was a typo, whatever the case might be. We just want to get some clarification. So the other component to the fencing is that under the zoning ordinance, I'm going to go back and forth on you a little bit here. Under the zoning ordinance, fencing is only allowed in a waterfront yard when it's a required enclosure around a pool. So in this case, the waterfront yard basically starts where the house ends in its relation from the water. So maybe this is a better drawing. So everything in this area, by definition, is the waterfront yard. So the location of the structure or the location of the fence as it relates to the waterfront component of it is one issue. The other issue is that we have heights, again, of 5 and/or 6 feet along the side lot line. So even when fencing is allowed, if it's on a side lot line, it can only be 4 feet in height. So this is really, there's two ways to look at it. I chose to look at it as a height issue. You could look at it conversely as a setback issue. The idea is that if you have more than a 4-foot tall fence, you're supposed to be 6 foot off of the side lot line. So this request does not meet that. The other aspect of the fence I wanted to bring up is they are allowed fencing in the side yard. So we have to start splitting hairs a little bit with definitions. So everything basically from this line here to really the front of the house. This is all by definition the side yard. They are allowed, again, either 4-foot tall fencing on the side lot line or 5 to 6 foot tall fencing if it has a 6-foot setback. So there is some amount of fencing that is permitted on this property, but it's in this area and it's not back in this area. And again, we still have that height/setback issue where one or the other isn't being met depending on your perspective. So this is a view. I apologize, I took a photo of this. I didn't lay the plans down as flat as I could have. But this is the elevation views of the proposed garage expansion. So again, I mentioned it's about 465 current. The add-on, I believe that is about a 390 square foot add-on, so they're not doubling it. It's less than double what's out there. If you were to look at this as a conventional zoning lot, i.e. not a waterfront lot, they would be allowed 900 square feet. So even though it doesn't meet the strict test of the ordinance, there was an intent to keep it under that sort of 900 square foot mark, and they did so. So were this not a waterfront lot, we would be having a completely different conversation right now. So in fact, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. So with all that out of the way, I've given some of the items in terms of the ordinance provisions. I want to give you the specific sections. So under 18.6A, Chapter 18 is your non-conforming chapter of your zoning ordinance. 18.6A relates to the permitted expansion of a non-conforming building. This is one, and I apologize, I didn't put the full list in here because I forgot Mr. Kennedy. This was his first meeting tonight. The rest of the board has seen a number of non-conforming expansion requests. It's a 3-pronged test to allow a non-conforming expansion, and that is that the side that's non-conforming has to provide 90% of the setback. The construction, the non-conformity can only be on one side of the residence. So in other words, you couldn't have a non-conforming front and side yard. That would disqualify you. And then thirdly, what you're building has to fully comply with the ordinance. So there are some provisions that allow the expansion of a non-conforming building. In this case, those provisions are not met. So that's the first variance here tonight, is to expand the non-conforming detached accessory building. The second relates to the size of that accessory building. I mentioned earlier, waterfront lots are only allowed 120 square feet maximum. That's per section 19.11 of the zoning ordinance. So that is the second variance before you tonight, and that is to allow a detached accessory building with 855 square feet above the 120 that would otherwise be allowed. So those are the two related to the building. Now I move into the fencing. So I also referenced this earlier, but I want to re-emphasize it. So Article 17, which are your waterfront provisions, that section of the ordinance does not permit fencing in a waterfront yard unless it's related to a required pool enclosure. So in this case, the amount of fencing, roughly, I believe I ballparked it, it's a little more than, it's about 50 feet of fencing is in the waterfront yard. So that is a third variance for the location of fencing. And then lastly, under the fence ordinance, section 103-4 either establishes a 4-foot height maximum along a side lot line or requires a 6-foot setback for anything taller than 4 feet up to 6 feet. So that's the fourth variance in this particular case. Again, the way I wrote it up was as in a height increase as opposed to a setback reduction, but certainly I'm open to more discussion on that if the board feels it's necessary. So my review letter, as you all probably got through it, I think you got the tone of it. I'll try to keep this somewhat short and sweet because we may need to have some more dialogue on this one. I mean, my overall summary is I do think there are some conditions present here that support some amount of variance. As I mentioned, it is a very narrow lot in relation to district standards as well as others in the neighborhood. The primary alternative to, in this case, a detached garage is an attached garage. The way the residence was designed, there really isn't a functional place to construct an attached garage, and allowing them upwards of the 855 square feet, I guess just my opinion, I can see some level of justification for, I believe in my letter I may have referred to it as a modern sized garage. 900 square feet is about the minimum we see people build these days. So for someone to inherit a 400 square foot garage, that is pretty small, especially when we're talking about a waterfront lot. They have the additional, they have not issues, but you have boat storage, you have other items that you put out in your waterfront. So I do see some potential support, just my opinion. Obviously, it's up to you all. So I do see some support as it relates to that. I also don't believe, I guess I'm going off with a lot of opinions here, but in terms of the fencing in the waterfront yard, given that they have ended the fence line at the end of their proposed garage, and you can see on the bigger overall scope here, obviously properties to the north, they won't ever see the fence because it's behind the house and the garage. Properties to the south, it aligns with the garage, so I really don't think that it disrupts any of the views. So I guess if the board is somewhat open to the location of the fence, in terms of the waterfront yard encroachment, this would be one of those properties where I guess I could see it being somewhat justified. My biggest concern with the whole request is I don't see the support or justification for the height increase. That's a fourth variance that in this case, I'm not sure what the extra 1 to 2 feet gets them, just in terms of whatever it is they're looking for, privacy, protection. It doesn't enclose anything, so I'm not sure. It does have a connection to the front of the garage, but again, in terms of its intended purpose, I'm not sure I personally see the justification. But that being said, I do want to make sure that the applicant has their opportunity to describe the project to you and present their ideas to you as to why they think it's supportable or justifiable. But that really, that's a very long-winded way of going through all of these points here. But I do think that there are some issues in terms of practical difficulty. I think you can make a finding under that for, again, I can make a finding under that for 3 of the 4 variances. The unique conditions of the property, I think somewhat support potentially 3 of the 4 variances. Substantial justice, I think in terms of fairness, I don't know that the extra height is necessarily unfair. It's just not the type of fence that other people would be allowed to construct. There was one extra photo I did not actually include in here. One of the neighboring properties does have some fencing as well. And I forget which one that is. And that may have been some taller fencing too. So I'm not sure that ultimately this project disrupts neighborhood character or anything like that. I don't have any issues in terms of light and air, in terms of pedestrian and traffic safety, those types of things. But I wanted to at least put that out there. And again, I think you can tell by the full read of my letter that I think it's really, we just need some more support or something to hang our hat on with respect to the need for the extra height on that fence. So that's a long-winded summary, Mr. Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions that you all may have.
Brian, my concern is the fence, and just curious if there's been any research, or maybe the owner will tell us later, has there been a permit pulled for the existing fence? Is there any
It was not.
justification?
It was not, no. That's how the project came to the attention of community development. A neighbor called community development, indicated that a fence had been constructed. They wanted
Yeah.
to know if a permit had been issued. It had not. Staff went
The
out.
fence is there now? and-
Correct.
Okay, so I'll wait for the owner to come and tell us all the details then.
So, I didn't mean to cut you off, John.
But
No, I'm okay, thank you, Jason.
Okay. If this was an attached garage,
Yes.
because that's how I kind of foil the substantial justice type thing in my mind, right? Like if this were a slightly different structure and it were an attached garage, the detached accessory waterfront maximum size limit wouldn't apply.
So
Right.
the only issue you would have with an attached would be, it would depend on where it would go.
Right.
In terms of, we still have to apply the average shoreline setback, which this is a really tough neighborhood to identify where that line actually is, because you can kind of see if you follow my cursor here. I mean, there's a sharp angle here, and then the residence to the south is actually even closer to the water than is the subject site. So, but yes, in terms of its size, if this were attached, then there would not be an issue with that. Its side setback is good, its height is good. In that case, its size would not be dependent upon the fact it was a waterfront lot.
Okay.
The only issue you would run into in this location would be if they were to try to run some type of, and we talked about this with the petitioner as well, and it's the odd angle. There just isn't really an opportunity to construct this so that it functions as an attached garage. So the only other thing we would have to look at that point would be kind of whether it encroaches into the average shoreline setback or not. But again, it's you can actually, if you look at the neighbor to the south, they've got a detached building that's even closer to the water than what the subject site has.
Yeah, given that, and I mean, yes, it's a waterfront lot, but I mean, it looks like this garage is 250 feet from even getting close to the water. I'm not all that concerned about the garage. The fence height is an issue, I think. And as far as side yard goes, if the neighbor to the south decided to install a fence on the lot line, and it were only the side yard by the definition of being along the side of the house, their fence would be almost the exact same as this fence as well. I think it's just a really peculiar lot. But that was my question regarding if it were attached, So I think that would change the dynamic a little.
Chairman,
Yes, sir, go ahead.
question, please. In terms of processing this application, 2 variances with 2 entirely different potential justifications. Should these be handled as separate and processed as separate motions?
I will leave that up to the board, however you're more comfortable. You could, if you want to divide it up into the proposed building addition and as one motion, and in terms of the fence as a second, you could, or you could incorporate all of it. You have the ability as a board to grant all, some, or none of the variances sought. So you wouldn't necessarily have to do it in 2 motions, but I guess if you felt as though it makes things a little clearer for everyone, you certainly could. There's nothing preventing you from doing that.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions? You mentioned a fence. I do believe there's a fence to the house north. It looks like it's about 5 or 6 feet tall, like a white
Yeah.
privacy
It was
fence.
a white privacy fence. I remember, and John took a picture of it. Unfortunately, I did not include that one in my photos because I made this one too big. And I didn't want to add an extra slide because I knew I had too much to say already.
Okay.
As I recall, Brian, I'm going from memory here, but I think that other fence to the north is actually corresponds with a side yard
Okay.
for that house on the north. I'm going from memory here.
Sure.
But that's what I recall. And I don't recall how tall it was.
I've got no more questions for Mr. Board. Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The petitioner want to come on up? Luke?
Bo Wynn, Detroit Architectural Group, Grosio resident, 26265 West River Road. Good friends with Matt Schreiber, lifelong resident here on the island. Thank you very much for showing up tonight. We appreciate 6 out of 7 being here, for sure. I want to thank Brian, who's been a tremendous help. You'll probably be seeing me in a couple of months for another appeal coming up, and he's just been great to deal with. We deal with each other on many municipal levels. So, first of all, I'm going to do a couple of different things here. Addressing the fence, I believe Matt can attest. On the drawing, we say from a 5-foot to a 6-foot. I believe he built the top level so that it was level with that soffit and the fascia of the garage so it doesn't tear up onto the landscape. So indeed, I believe it is 5 foot on the east side, 6 foot on the west side. So that's the answer to that. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, but
Yes, sir.
You're trying to justify the height of the fence. Is there a permit granted for that fence?
No, there's not, sir. And
Application for having it?
ignorance. Complete.
Ignorance. Okay. that's-
Yep, complete, not knowing
Well,
not to pull a permit.
Can I append on that? What's the intent of the fence? What are you trying to accomplish?
The corral, I have another exhibit that I didn't include in here. I could pass out, I have a bunch of copies here, if I could just do that real quick.
Doing that, are you you're a construction person?
Architect, sir.
Did you have anything to do with the fence?
I did not.
So you knew it was there, were you gonna investigate whether it was, were you gonna investigate whether it was properly there or not, since you,
Found out, that's what brought some of this to the head, that when Matt found out that he needed a permit for the fence, commensurate with doing the addition, he had planned on doing the addition later on, and found out we had the fence issue, so he said we may as well, there's issues with both of them that we may have to go to the ZBA, so that's why we're here today. And to further that, quite frankly, Palms Up is the fence is not built on the property line. So he knows he has to get a survey and he has to back that up a little more to the garage. So we will definitely take care of that, make sure that it is on the property line. So to further the discussion, as you can see in the picture, to the left is the neighbor to the south. You can see that the finished floor elevation and the pad of that house is significantly higher than Mr. Schreiber's house. Couple things there. So you can see that a 4-foot fence isn't going to do a whole lot to screen. And basically, to the south of the garage, he just wants to have a little corral, a little privacy area, so when he's building and tinkering on things, it won't be unsightly to the south neighbor or to anybody else. A 4-foot fence wouldn't allow for anything to be built, significant of some of the crafts and some of the things that he does. So he wanted to extend that up 6 foot. That's number one. Number two is, with regard to the visual of that fence, you can see the neighbor, even at the sill line of their window, is higher than that fence is going to be. So I don't believe that to be unsightly when they're looking north from that neighbor.
Sorry. Initially, I was concerned about the height of the fence. I certainly understand doing a fence so that it moves with the property and you have a level top to your fence. I did the same thing on a fence of mine. Mine's not on the property line, so it's not
Right.
doesn't have the same issues. But I can certainly see the neighbor has a fence that's definitely
That's
at least a
that's
5 or 6 foot fence, and it is definitely right on the petitioner's property line. So they either have a variance or also didn't comply with the right. Just an observation.
Thank you for that. If we were to comply with the ordinance and build a new fence 6 foot high, there's 12 foot of south or side yard to deal with, so moving that 6 foot in is a practical difficulty, doesn't allow much use of that area for.
I'm sorry, you lost me again here now.
So
If you were to comply with the requirements and build a 6-foot fence, you can't build a 6-foot.
Right,
You have to move it
We have-
It's
6
not
foot
part of the
back.
requirement.
right. If we moved it per the ordinance, if we moved it 6 foot off the line.
Oh, okay.
And did a 6 foot fence, sorry if I didn't make myself clear, then would only net out 6 feet between the fence and the
Oh.
garage, which is not of much
So the
use.
point is, you still want to build a 6-foot fence where it is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well,
You're not allowed to do
They
that.
want to still approve what's there.
Right, so we're asking for a variance for that. And just to that point,
Excuse me, a variance to as far as where the house is, because you extend past the house. Well, What
Correct.
are you looking for? I'm still lost.
we're looking to put the fence past the house as well, or at least along the garage. He has a landscape trailer.
Have a fence as long as it's within the house, but beyond the house, you're not allowed, I don't believe, to have a 4-foot fence or a 3-foot fence.
I don't think he's going to extend behind the house. Let me just pull up my
But
map.
let, Brian can tell us
Well, I think that the fence is set up to meet the end of the garage and almost to the beginning of the house. So I think
Correct.
the intent is, if it were an attached structure, he could do that. But because it's not an attached structure, he can't.
I believe, I have my glasses on, past the garage heading east, I believe that's, 48 feet? Which wouldn't extend past the front of the house at that point. It would actually screen a trailer that comes home with him every night because he's a landscaper by trade.
Down towards the water I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. So we'd like,
They're trying to say here that if the garage was an attached structure, which it is not,
correct,
you could go to the garage, but it is not.
it is not.
I don't see the justification going beyond the house for it.
It's so that the fence and the use of the fence is not to encapsulate it, to keep a child or a dog in. It's basically for a screen. And that, hence then it should be 6 foot high to adequately screen what Mr. Schreiber's trying to do. So that's why we stopped it at the garage, didn't run it further than the garage as not to be a visual nuisance to the south neighbor.
Yeah,
So
if
that's our ask.
If he only followed the length of the house, because of the peculiar nature of his lot, he'd have like a 30-foot long fence. It wouldn't be useful, so it would be burdensome.
Well, okay,
So you
I
try to-
have a house on the waterfront, and I know I was rejected to put a fence beyond the house, okay? And I don't know why this should be any different. Why should be allowed to do that?
Can I ask this? So you're trying to screen the garage as well? Is that the case
Yes,
here?
sir.
Why are you trying to screen the garage as well? Is the garage going to be unsightly?
I don't believe so. I believe that there's going to be some activity adjacent to the garage to the south. There's going to be tools, there's going to be engines being hung, there's going to be some crafts being done and wood stuff that without a screen wall at all may seem
But those
unsightly to the
engines and
neighbor.
crafts and stuff are going to be done inside the garage or on the
Sorry,
south side of the garage? Where is
And here's
it?
the first part, I'm sorry.
So the engines being hung or whatever the case may be, crafts like you mentioned a second ago, are they going to be inside the garage or are they going to be on the south side of the garage outside?
Well, we're hoping to be able to do something on the outside of the garage as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And the whole premise before, how long ago did you buy the house, Matt? It's only been 10 months ago. So he had thought that he'd be able to do some of these things when he bought the property.
I understand that. I
Right.
ran into that problem myself. When I bought my house.
Could I ask, I know you keep asking the resident, is he going to come up?
He can, if you'd like.
Yeah, I would like to ask him a question, but go ahead. Identify yourself.
I'm Matthew Schreiber. I live at 19802 Keith Avenue. I've lived on Grillsville my whole life and plan to stay.
I don't mean to be argumentative or anything, but I'm curious, why did you decide you could put that fence up?
Well, when I bought the house, it was coming towards the fall time. And again, I like doing stuff in the garage. I'm outside a lot and stuff.
Did you just say, I'm going to put a fence up, or did
Yeah.
you go down and ask?
No,
Can I put up a fence?
I just wanted to put up a fence before winter time came.
I would have liked to do that on my lot too, but they wouldn't let me.
I think.
Yeah, and
I mean, a lot of people don't know all of the zoning ordinances and stuff, and it doesn't excuse the mistake. But I mean, obviously, he's a
no, that's
young
why I'm
guy
here
trying
to.
to improve his house. I mean,
No, I know, Jameson, I'm just saying, the fence is there and it's not allowed.
yeah, he
We're
may.
trying to justify it
And I was going
because it's
to.
already up or something.
And I was going to remove it, but I talked with Lori and met with Brian, and they said to leave it until we went through the process. So I left it until I'm here to go through the process.
Okay.
So if
Yeah,
I
I
looked
don't
at your
think,
application, your application says that if you have to, you remove it and you put shrubbery up anyways. Either way, you put some kind of screen up there. Is that correct?
Yes, what is allowed.
That was on
Yeah.
your application, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
So, if we determined that you could retain the fence, but you had to make it 4 feet tall, which I realize is not optimum for you, would that what kind of hardship would that generate for you? You go out there, you rip it down with a saber saw, you move some posts, or is that not something you could do yourself?
Oh, no, I do all my own work. I'll work around my house. I do it all myself.
Okay.
I mean, it's a wood fence, so it's easily modified, and I have no problem going out and modifying it to fit the standards, what you guys seem fit. I'm here trying to figure out what we can
How's
agree
your
on.
south side neighbor feel about it? Have you talked to them?
That is a rental house.
Okay.
The guy that owns it, I ran into him one time. The actual renter, I've ran into them 6 times, and I've lived there for 10 months. That's how often I see them.
Okay.
So I have no idea of their opinion or what.
You have any issues with them right now currently, at least not that you're aware of?
He's the one that called about the
Right.
fence to begin with, but outside of that, no idea.
Hey, so is there, I see another structure down here by the water west of your place. Is that a house or a boathouse?
That is a boathouse.
Okay. So,
Yes, that is a boathouse.
big old boat.
That's your neighbors?
Where is it?
That's the neighbor's,
There.
yes.
The neighbor has a
I thought that was a shed. The
yeah,
boathouse.
big old boathouse down there.
They do have a shed in their backyard as well.
They have two separate accessory structures.
Uh-oh, that's not allowed.
So,
Neighbors themselves.
right. And the neighbor to the north has a non-conforming fence along his property line.
Yep.
Correct. And I met with him. He was going to try to get in here, but he just came back from out of town.
Well,
this
I'm
morning.
not trying to say, this isn't like a witch hunt. We're not gonna like go knock on
no.
doors.
No,
Hey,
no,
this is, and
But we're
kick
just
anybody's
talking about
fences
your
down.
fence
Yep.
now.
Yep, I'm just trying to get my stuff situated. That's
I-
all I care about.
I bring that up to the fellow gentleman on the board here just because it looks like there's quite a lot of variance granted in this area already. And maybe or maybe not the other members of this board feel the fence should be 4 feet high or not, but I think he's certainly got an argument as far as fairness goes in that area, so.
Well, I'm sorry, I guess we're
Can I
talking
go back
amongst
to-
ourselves, we shouldn't be doing that. I'm not sure there's any variances granted on any fence here.
That white fence is
Mr.
definitely over 4 feet tall.
Well, we don't know if
No,
those
yeah,
permitted
but
or
whether
not.
there's a variance or not is the
We don't know.
question.
Yeah, we don't know that. That's
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
a couple of points, please. First, talking about the other part of this, which is the expansion. I think that, given the fact that given this lot size and given the position, allowing the larger building is the right thing to do for fairness purposes. The point was made, this is well back from the water line. Okay, if this were able to be a connected garage, it would have certainly been able to be accommodating without a variance. My one issue with the garage is when the neighbor to the south looks at this, he's going to see a 42-foot bare wall with no architectural features. That's 23 feet or 22 feet of the existing garage and another 20 feet of the new garage. As an architect, how does that sound to you?
I have a solution for that, because it doesn't sound
Okay,
very
what is the
good.
solution?
Solution is, if we are allowed a 6-foot wall, we can make it a hybrid wall.
Okay, what if you don't get that? What's your solution?
Then we could add some windows or a dormer or some other architectural features that would make it interesting.
Okay, so if the fence is 4 foot instead of 6 foot, you will put,
Some interesting components on the sides.
okay,
Mhm.
subject to the approval of the planner.
I think we'd be amenable to that, yes.
Okay, so that would certainly satisfy me. As far as this fence is concerned, I see the fence cutting back, it runs east-west, and then there's the jut that runs to the existing garage. Is that a gate? What is that?
Correct.
That
Yep.
is a gate.
That's a gate.
Yes.
Right. Yep, for a boat trailer could sit there, so it has to have access instead of sitting in a driveway out in the open.
You do a lot of work on your own boat? Is that what this is?
I do work on all my own
When his
stuff.
boat's in the water down at the dock, then the trailer has to live somewhere, so that's where that trailer would live.
I like tinkering on stuff. I like working on stuff, so I always got projects going on.
And the reason why this, with this large expansion of the garage, you can't do your work inside your garage? What's the reason for that?
I could, but it's always, I'm gonna have overflow, as Brian mentioned. Today's standards, about 1,000 square foot garage. I'm gonna still be under that. Again, I have a lot of,
Well, with this expansion, what's the purpose of the expansion? What are you going to use the expansion for, if not for the work that you're going to be doing?
storage and working on stuff as well. I can't even fit my truck in the current garage.
So we're putting
Let
a larger
alone
door on it.
put in a larger door, then I can put my truck in there and still work on stuff. And then if need be no room for a trailer, I can put trailer outside and stuff, so I have somewhere to park my vehicles and stuff.
You have a wood shop too, right? You mentioned.
I had a wood shop.
Okay.
I own a lawn business here on the island, and I have an extra lawnmower and stuff that I have to work on. I have to work on my current equipment upkeep and stuff, and
All right.
Plows and other things,
Yep.
you know.
Okay, well, no, all right, so I understand now about the accessory building and all that, and the bottom line on that is if Okay, if the fence is not 6 feet, your commitment is that there will be architectural features added, which will make it not a blank wall for the neighbor to the south, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the fence. The fence that you put up has 0 architectural features. It's painted green, for Pete's sake. It's not even a, okay, okay, you were talking about the fence to the north. The fence to the north, if you put that picture back, if you look at this, is architectural. It's got features to it. I mean, if you're gonna look at a fence, I'd much prefer to look at this fence than I would at this bare wood fence. Okay? If this commission grants a 6-foot fence, would you put in an architectural fence so it looks better?
Yes, I have
You
no,
would take down what's there and you would put up something that would look good,
yep,
because, you know, I looked at that fence, I think that fence is ugly.
okay,
I think that's negative for the neighborhood, and that's just my opinion. Okay? If I were looking at a fence like the one in your picture, a lot of my objections would go away.
Is color a component of the fencing ordinance?
No, I'm telling you, it's my opinion.
Okay.
Okay, I'm entitled to express my opinion about what I see and what I like and what I don't like. Okay, if the architectural, if the commission were to direct it, to allow that 6-foot fence, would you change it to something that was architecturally?
yes.
We're
yep.
really happy for your
To say-
inquiry, because
yep.
actually, some of the solution I was talking of earlier was to put some lattice insets inside, put some vines that grow up, we'd make it a hybrid, make it a living fence in portions of it, do some planter boxes.
Okay,
and
now
make
that's a whole different concept. All right, now, how is that integrated into what you've asked for?
I was gonna explain it tonight, depending on what we would be discussing, so. I
Well, we
can
hear
come
that.
back.
So expand on that, please, for the.
Move forward on that, on the.
Right, so actually, so I would just jump to the table, you know, the accessory table. There's a portion down here, I don't have the top, Brian, but E4, it gives a bunch of areas that you're allowed, right? And then it says, the planning commission may grant approval to allow an accessory building larger than the above maximum floor area where the following conditions are met. And then here's the following conditions. The lot shall have an area of at least 30,000 square feet, we meet that. The accessory building shall be screened from view of adjacent lots through a combination of setback, vegetation, proposed landscape, and put that on the landscape plan. So what I was gonna propose is to allow the hard fence for Mr. Schreiber's use to, you know, to give you 100% opacity, along with vegetation, vines, little windows with some lattice with a planter box and a couple different elements instead of one just big flat wall. So
Okay.
that was gonna be my pitch.
All right, so that,
And
no,
then-
that's making sense to me. Now,
Yep.
you can't put, if it's on the property line, you can't plant something on the
Right.
neighbor's side. So what are you
Right,
gonna do
we'd have
about
to set
that?
it back a foot,
You'd set it back in a foot,
protrude on, yes, sir.
and it would give you room to make plantings on the south side of that fence.
Correct. Right. We could hang, you know, a grillage of wire and allow a trumpet vine or allow some, you know, vines and stuff to grow up and do some planter boxes.
So that coupled with an architectural fence and all these nice landscape features would be what you're actually in fact asking for. Okay, I really wish you would have put that in the application,
I do as well now. Yes,
because
sir.
it sounds a whole lot better to me than what I see.
Right.
Okay, I'm done.
Anybody else have any questions? Yes, sir, go ahead.
I agree with Mr. Zwicker, and I don't have any problem with the addition of the garage. It's a hardship for you. My problem is this fence. If we grant this fence, I don't know what the justification is for it, that we don't have the right, then have to grant all other fences that people come and request. I don't know what the justification here is for that fence. So I have a waterfront lot. I was told I can't have that kind of fence.
Well, I would just
What's
go
the
back.
justification that I can tell other people, no, you can't have that fence when they come here? Or do we just give everybody, put everybody we want to put fences up, put them up?
Mr. Chair, if I could just jump in real quick. You're not a precedent-setting body. Every case is treated individually. Every property has different aspects and components. So just because you grant one variance does not mean that everyone on the island gets the same variance. So I just want to make sure that that's clear for the board's understanding.
Mr.
You each one individually.
So, Mr. Chair, I asked Brian, I say, if we have to have some justification that makes this unique. Otherwise, everyone that comes asking for a fence like this, which is prohibited, I can't in good conscience say no to them because we've said it before with no reason. What's the reason? We have to have a reason in this case which makes it unusual. Yeah, correct.
Well, hold on,
That's what-
Mr. Kennedy has a question as well, when Mr. Kennedy was done here. Mr. Schweikert. Are you guys both done?
I was gonna-
Not really, but go ahead.
No, I mean, no, Mr. Kennedy has a question first too, 'cause I want to add something too after he's done, but
Concurring with what Mr. Schweikert said, my concern with the fence was aesthetics. And I understand you're willing to address that.
Correct.
I mean, that was my main concern. Also, the fact that it was on the waterfront side of the house. I went by the property by water the other day, and it is so deep within the property, it doesn't present any, to me, any problem looking at the structures from the water. In other words, my assumption is the reason for no waterfront or no fences on waterfront property would be for view from the neighbors and things of that nature. And I didn't see that from the water. But the aesthetics did come to mind. Now, my question then is, we're talking about vegetation, we're talking about an architectural fence. Are we down to 4 feet now, or are we still at 6 feet?
Well, they're requesting the variance for a 6-foot fence.
Right. So are we still wanting 6 feet and architectural and vegetation,
Yes.
or would
Yes, sir.
4 feet architectural and vegetation work?
I think if we had to do 4 foot, would be a standard fence. We could still make it architecturally pleasing, like the white fence with some pickets and posts. But if we go 6 foot, we're willing to go ahead and put additional components in there with plantings and lattice and.
I have a question here. So,
You don't need a variance for a 4-foot
What-
fence, right?
no, you do not.
Well, on the waterfront.
Yeah, they do.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, on the waterfront they would. That's,
For a 4-foot fence along the side of his house.
In the side yard.
They need a standard
That's,
variance.
that's the
anything
problem
back
I'm
there.
having here.
Hold on, Mr. Borden, do we have to have a variance for a 4-foot fence on a side yard of a home? Not going extended past it, but just for the side yard?
On the side yard, no.
No.
Correct.
Correct.
So you're talking about just the extension part, that's what the variances need.
That's what I've been
So let me
talking
ask you
about.
this then, for the extension, I understand where Mr. Kaniga was coming from. I live on the water as well, and there's a whole bunch of issues with that. Would there be an issue just stopping the fence at the garage and then putting like arborvitae or something to block your, to give you screening that you're looking for? I know it might take a little, year or two for them to grow
I
into place.
understand that. Living on the island, we know deer. I get deer all the time through my yard. Arborvitaes would just get shredded up. I'm a landscaper, I know that. As far as some sort of pines or something, we could plant that, but in 20 years when those grow, well, that's going to block the whole water view from the road or to from the neighbor. So I was trying to keep something that was a
I
sustained
don't think that's gonna
height.
affect the neighbor's view regardless, right there, because you're so far back, close to the rub. You have so much space
Yep.
between your home and the yard. The water.
The practical difficulty with the fence is that if he goes with a 6-foot fence, he moves it 6 feet back and now has a useless piece of property between his garage and his fence.
Yes.
You can't fit a boat, a car, an engine lift, nothing in 5 feet of property. So he moves it back out to the property line. Well, then he runs into the 4-foot fence height problem, right? So the variance, I believe that we have on the table is a variance for the height of the fence, not the length of the fence. Because practically speaking, we're talking 300 feet off the water and alongside an accessory structure already. I understand that letter of the law, it's the side of the house. But if he moved that garage up and attached it to the back of the house, he could throw a fence all the way down to the bottom of
Right.
it, So I think practically speaking, the back of the garage is the corner of the side yard. And functionally speaking, the back of the garage is the corner of the side yard. But that's just my 2 cents. I guess it seems like we're in concurrence on the expansion of the garage. Do we maybe want to vote on that and then
Yeah, we can do
maybe
that.
try the fence with conditions?
Yeah, I do like what Mr. Schweiker said about splitting it up to two different votes. So do you want to make a motion then for the garage? We'll start with the garage.
Okay. Does anybody want to stab at it? Okay. Due to the practical difficulty facing this project and the unnecessary burden facing the applicant, I move that we approve the variance to allow the expansion of the garage as it maintains the character of the neighborhood, preserves the spirit of waterfront zoning, and provides substantial justice to the resident.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, friendly amendment, please, that you also include the requirement that architectural features be added to the proposed addition.
I'll accept the friendly amendment. Thanks, Mr. Schweiker.
Subject to the approval of the township.
Final plans approval. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Subject to final plan approval by the township.
Okay.
So just so we're all clear, we're going to have a vote on approving the structure with architectural detail and design. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Nelson
Mr.
seconded it.
Oh, so we have a second, so Mr. Nelson seconded.
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy?
Aye.
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 Okay, the motion for the garage portion of this variance passes as stated. So let's move on to the fence. Is there any more discussion about the fence?
I'd like to take one more crack at the 4 foot versus 6 foot. Okay? With a 4 foot fence coupled with the landscape that your colleague there pointed out. Seems to me like a pretty reasonable compromise. What's your thoughts?
Draw it up as quickly as I can right here.
I'm sorry?
Trying to draw it up as quickly as I can right here.
My main thing with the 4 foot versus 6 foot is this picture that Bo gave to you guys. Because of the elevation differences and stuff, I felt like a 4 foot fence would kind of defeat the whole purpose of me using that area back there of privacy and whatnot. That's why I did keep the front half as low as I could to continue the straight line all the way down. I'd be willing to make any modifications needed. I have no problem with that as long as we can please everyone involved.
Okay, well, I'll keep asking questions. If not 6, how about 5?
I would say 6 foot just because most men are about 6 foot tall and that gives
Correct, and
a
I'm-
barrier of, so I would just go back just to preface to say, the definition of a fence is to either encapsulate an area or provide a barrier between properties or components. Or a fence could also be deemed as a screen. In this case, it would be a screen more than just a barrier or an encapsulation element. So having it be a screen and making it nicer, I think, makes a lot of sense.
So the practical difficulty then, the justification then, that basically you're saying is that the area behind the fence, between that and the garage, is a work area, okay? And as such, requires screening from the neighbors to the south or from the people from the street. And that work area can, in practical terms, only be done in that area, not in the garage, because the garage is going to be used for parking vehicle and storage. Now, is
The
that,
north is a patio, and it's probably not the best spot to be doing that type of work.
yeah, the opposite side of the garage, you're right, is
Right.
exactly that.
I mean, if I could, I don't
So
know
is
if this
that,
right or
so
wrong to
that
do or
in
not,
effect is your justification? You
Yeah.
you are attempting to screen an area that is a
Cor-
heavy construction. Now, when I took the picture from the back, if you put that picture back up there, that's a pretty nasty looking area.
Has a trailer there.
Yeah, I'm in the
Couple
middle
little-
of
Yeah, I mean,
storing
it's
my
a work area. That's what
Yes.
it's supposed to be. I'm not being
And it's
critical.
the
But I'm
screen-
saying
the whole-
that is a work area.
Ladders.
And the whole point of the screen is so the neighbors and fellow passengers driving by don't have to see any of that.
Okay, perhaps that is the justification which makes this more unique than somebody just walking in and saying, I want a 6-foot fence.
Correct.
Thank you.
And would you be more amenable to that, Mr. Swikert, if it were white and had some baluses at the top?
Yeah,
or other architectural-
I would like to have exactly what your colleague there stated earlier. Architectural features, a nice architectural feature fence, not that plain wood thing. You know, make it look like the one on the opposite side for the neighbor. I mean, that would enhance the neighborhood. Okay? Put the plantings in like you talked about. Move the fence 1 foot in off the property line. Put up your vines and whatever other nice things that you come up with. Present a plan to the township for review and approval prior to proceeding. Now, that I would be happy with the justification that we just talked about.
No
We
problem
can
with
do
that.
I'd be satisfied with that.
I'd be satisfied if, number one, we knew what the ordinance was. Okay, and I still don't think we do. And number two, if they went back and redid this request and then came back with exactly what they're gonna do, if they're gonna do what John says or not. I don't believe we know what the ordinance is, so.
Which ordinance are you speaking about?
Well, let me throw one other thing at this. Okay, we just got done approving the expansion. One of the justifications for the expansion was the fact that, of the practical difficulty, the fact that the house can't be connected to that garage.
Correct.
Okay? It can't be. So, as such, if we're connected, you could have a much even bigger structure than what's there and what's being proposed. So we approved that. Okay? The fence running all the way along the side of the garage, if we're using the argument that you can't practically connect the garage to the house, okay? The same argument applies with this fence. If that were connected to the house, that fence could run right to the back of the garage. It would be a side yard,
I agree.
okay? And the only issue would be 4 foot versus 6 foot. Okay, it would not be an issue other than that. And if we accept the fact that we just got done approving the expansion, then that becomes the basis for the approval of the fence. And it's only 4 foot versus 6 foot.
Which is the variance that
The
we're,
variance is being asked for.
Correct.
I agree, John, but it's not an attached garage. It's a detached accessory.
But in this property, it can't be. In this property, it can't be.
Okay, well,
Well, go ahead and vote, Mr.
I mean,
It's all right.
Mr. Schweiker, would you want to go ahead and start off with a motion then?
No,
Okay.
please let someone else.
okay. Okay, back to me. All right. Due to the practical difficulty facing this project and the unnecessary burden facing the applicant in establishing his work area, I move that a variance be granted to Article 17, Section 103-4 of the fencing ordinance to allow a 6-foot fence with the conditions that it be painted white, when moved back 1 foot, and be have architectural designs added to it, as it preserves the spirit of the waterfront zoning and provides substantial justice to the resident, providing plans department approval. Mr. Swiker, is that the?
Yeah, that's a lot of it, but friendly motion.
Okay.
I'd like the motion to read that it is an architectural fence, not this fence moved, an architectural fence.
Okay.
And that is, and like you said, 1 foot off the property line with landscaping part of the proposal, and that whole package is subject to review by the township prior to construction. For the reasons
Amenable to that.
that you specified.
Okay.
Right.
John, can I ask who reviews it?
Sorry?
Who's going to review this?
This would be the township. This would be staff. Or Brian, whoever. I mean, however.
Building
however-
department.
So they have the
Brian,
final authority then?
Yes. They have the approval. At that point, it becomes subjective. It's not an issue of a variance anymore.
I don't think we can discuss it anymore unless there's a second.
Okay.
I'll second it. I'll second our motion we discussed earlier.
Okay.
Can just ask for a clarification, is it 4-foot fence or a 6-foot fence?
6 foot.
6-foot fence. Unbelievable.
So the motion was seconded. We'll start with the vote. Mr. Kennedy?
Aye.
Mr. Nelson?
Aye.
Mr. Yeager?
Aye.
Aye from myself.
Nay.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Looks like we are all set.
Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Most gracious.
Gentlemen, before we go, though, we have some more business to look
yeah.
at.
We are approaching the annual Zoning Board of Appeals officer elections. So as it stands now, I believe Mr. Mills is the secretary.
Yes.
Who is the vice chair? Is that Mr.
Wojo. Yep.
Okay. Mr. Wojno. And then, we don't have a treasurer, do we?
No.
Okay. So we have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. Correct. Okay.
I'd like to
Go ahead.
make
yeah.
a motion to go ahead and table this to our next meeting. So hopefully we'll have a full board here. So if somebody doesn't get put in a position they may not want.
Good point.
Pardon me? Well, so I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to go ahead and table this to the next meeting. Anybody want a second that?
Second.
Support.
All support? Any nays? Okay, it will be tabled to the next meeting.
So,
Any public comment, sir? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Mr. Nelson?
Yay.
Nay? Mr. Kennedy?
Aye.
Aye. I vote aye. Jurgensen votes aye. Aye. Any nays down here? Nope. We're adjourned.